I'd spent 12 years in the ER, my heart protected by an unbreakable wall. But that night, as a monster stalked my patient through the hospital halls, an army of bikers showed me what true protection looked like. The first rule of the ER is that you can't get attached. You learn to build a wall, a thick, sterile barrier between your heart and the tide of human suffering that washes through the sliding glass doors every single night. I'd been an ER nurse for 12 years, and my wall was fortress grade. I broke that rule the night a 17-year-old girl was wheeled in, unconscious and bleeding, from a single-car accident on the interstate. Her name was Maya. That's what it said on her driver's license. She was beautiful, even with the gash on her forehead and the ventilator tube taped to her mouth. The paramedics said she'd been run off the road, her car tumbling into a ditch. She had a broken leg, 3 cracked ribs, and a severe concussion. We rushed her into a trauma bay, a whirlwind of beeping machines, clipped orders, and the sharp scent of antiseptic. She was critical, but she was stable. A fighter. My job was to keep her that way. About an hour into my shift, a man stormed into the ER, demanding to see her. He was in his late 40s, wearing a cheap suit that was too tight across his thick middle. His face was flushed, slick with a greasy sweat that had nothing to do with the hospital's air conditioning. He reeked of entitlement. "I'm her stepfather, Rick," he announced to the charge nurse, his voice a gravelly boom that made everyone flinch. "I need to see her. Now." He tried to push past the desk, but I stepped in his way. "Sir, I'm sorry. She's in a critical state. We're not allowing visitors in the trauma bay right now." He looked down at me, his eyes small and hard. "I'm not a visitor. I'm her father. I have rights." He emphasized the word father like it was a weapon. Something about him made my skin crawl. It wasn't just grief or panic. It was something colder, something predatory. "As soon as she's moved to the ICU and is stable enough for visitors, we will let you know," I said, my voice firm. The well-practiced tone of someone who deals with agitated family members for a living. He sneered. "You people always have a reason, don't you?" He didn't move. He just stood there, a bulldog blocking the hallway, staring towards the closed curtains of the trauma bay where Maya was fighting for her life. I had to call security to escort him to the waiting room, and he went with a string of muttered curses, promising he'd be back. 40 minutes later, a woman stumbled in. She was the polar opposite of Rick. Frail, her eyes wide with terror and rimmed with red. Her clothes were disheveled, and she was clutching a worn-out purse to her chest like a shield. "My daughter," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Maya Washington, the car accident." This was her mother, Lisa. I led her to a small private consultation room. As soon as the door closed, she collapsed into a chair, and the story came tumbling out in a torrent of whispered, terrified words. It wasn't just an accident. Rick, her husband, had been chasing Maya. They'd had a fight, a bad one. Maya had finally stood up to him, defending her mother, and had tried to leave. Rick got in his truck and ran her off the road. My blood went cold. "He did what?" I asked, my professional composure cracking. Lisa was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. He hates her. He always has. He said if he couldn't control her, no one would have her. He came here to finish it. I know he did. He called me and told me he was going to the hospital to make sure she couldn't tell anyone what happened. The fortress wall around my heart didn't just crack. It crumbled into dust. The man in the waiting room wasn't a concerned stepfather. He was a monster, and his victim was lying helpless in a bed just 50 feet away. I locked the consultation room door and grabbed my phone, dialing security again. "The man in the waiting room, Rick Miller, he's a threat to a patient. You need to remove him from the building. Now." But the hospital was short-staffed, and a multi-car pileup had just flooded the ER. Security was swamped. They promised to send someone when they could. When they could wasn't good enough. I looked out the small window of the door and saw Rick pacing, his eyes locked on the hallway leading to the ICU, where we had just moved Maya. He looked like a wolf waiting for the shepherd to turn his back. I spent the next hour acting as a human barrier, finding excuses to keep him occupied, intercepting his attempts to get past the nurse's station. But I knew it was a losing battle. He was getting more and more agitated, his voice louder, his threats more explicit. I felt a primal fear I hadn't felt in years. Then, through the chaos of the ER, a new sound began to cut through the noise. It started as a low, distant rumble, like thunder on the horizon, but it grew steadily, a deep, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate up through the concrete floor. Every head in the ER turned towards the main entrance. The rumbling became a deafening roar, as dozens, then scores, of motorcycles pulled into the hospital's ambulance bay, their headlights cutting through the night like a swarm of angry eyes. They blocked everything, the entrance, the exit, the entire front of the hospital. The roar of the engines cut out in unison, plunging the ER into a sudden, tense silence, broken only by the beeping of the monitors. The glass doors slid open, and a man who looked like he was carved from granite stepped inside, his leather vest adorned with the patch of a local biker club. He scanned the room, his eyes missing nothing, until they landed on me. Behind him, an army of men in leather stood waiting, their faces grim and set. My heart hammered against my ribs, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from a sudden, shocking surge of hope. The man strode towards my desk, his boots echoing on the linoleum. He leaned in close, his voice a low, controlled rumble that was more intimidating than any shout. "I'm Marcus Washington," he said, his gaze unwavering. "Maya is my daughter, and I hear there's a man in here who needs to leave." The name Washington clicked into place. Lisa Washington. Maya Washington. This wasn't just a random biker club. This was her family. Rick, still lurking near the waiting room, seemed to shrink as Marcus and half a dozen of his men walked towards him. The ER, a place of constant noise, fell into a profound hush. The only sounds were the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the heavy, deliberate tread of biker boots on tile. The air grew thick, electric. Rick puffed out his chest, a pathetic attempt at bravado. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he blustered, his voice cracking. "You can't just come in here." Marcus stopped a foot in front of him. He was a good 6 inches taller than Rick, with a presence that seemed to suck all the air out of the room. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "I'm the man whose daughter you just tried to kill," he said, his voice a low, chilling rumble. "Lisa called me, told me everything." The color drained from Rick's sweaty face. His mask of indignant fatherhood dissolved, revealing the sniveling coward underneath. He stammered, his eyes darting around for an escape route, but he was surrounded. A wall of leather and muscle had silently formed a semicircle behind him. They didn't touch him. They just stood there, arms crossed, radiating pure menace. I don't know what you're talking about," Rick whimpered. "It was an accident." "Get out," Marcus commanded. It wasn't a request. "Get out of this hospital and don't ever come near my daughter or her mother again. If I see your face again, if I even hear your name in the same zip code, the next hospital you visit won't be able to fix what we do to you." Just then, 2 flustered hospital security guards finally jogged up, their eyes wide at the scene. Okay, what's going on here? You guys can't be in here." Before Marcus could even turn, I stepped forward, positioning myself between the bikers and the guards. "This man," I said, pointing a shaking finger at Rick, "is a threat to a patient. His wife has given a statement that he intentionally ran his stepdaughter, our patient, off the road. He came here to harm her further. These men," I gestured to the bikers, "are the patient's family. They are here to ensure her safety." The guards looked from me to the terrified Rick, to the stone-faced mountain of a man in front of him, and then to the 50 other bikers standing sentinel. They made a quick and wise calculation. One of the guards grabbed Rick's arm. "Sir, you need to come with us." Rick didn't resist. He practically scrambled to go with them, a pathetic eagerness to escape Marcus's gaze. As they dragged him towards the exit, he twisted his head and shot a look of pure venom at Marcus. "You think this is over? She's my wife. The law is on my side," he shrieked, his voice echoing in the silent ER before the sliding doors hissed shut behind him. A collective breath was released. The tension didn't disappear, but it changed. The immediate threat was gone. Marcus turned to me, and the hard lines of his face softened, replaced by a raw, desperate fear that every parent of a critically injured child wears. The intimidating club president was gone. In his place was just a dad. My little girl, is she—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "She's a fighter," I said, my voice softer now. "She's in the ICU, second floor. She has a serious concussion and some broken bones, but she's stable. For now." He nodded, absorbing the information. He looked over his shoulder at his men. "You heard the nurse. Second floor. ICU. Find the stairs. Find the elevators. Be quiet. Be respectful. But nobody that isn't a doctor or a nurse gets on that floor without my permission. Go." Like a silent, disciplined unit, the bikers dispersed. They moved with a surprising stealth, fanning out to cover every entrance to the second floor. They weren't thugs. They were a security detail. They were a father's promise made manifest. Marcus and I rode the staff elevator up to the ICU. As the doors opened, we were greeted by the sight of two bikers standing like statues on either side of the hallway entrance. They nodded at Marcus, their eyes scanning everything. The floor was secure. For the first time all night, I felt like I could finally breathe. Maya was safe. She was protected. I led Marcus to the window of her room, and he pressed his hand against the glass, his shoulders slumping as he looked at his daughter, so small and still in the hospital bed, surrounded by a web of wires and tubes. And then the world fell apart. A piercing, high-pitched alarm screamed from her room. The calm, rhythmic lines on her heart monitor plunged into a frantic, jagged mess before flatlining. Azistol. Code blue. Her heart had stopped. The bikers in the hall turned, their faces masks of confusion and fear, as a team of nurses and doctors sprinted past us, crashing through the door to her room. Marcus yelled her name, his voice breaking with anguish as they swarmed her bed, one doctor shouting, "Starting compressions." My training slammed back into place, a cold, efficient machine taking over my emotions. I shoved past a stunned Marcus and into the room, my hands already reaching for the code cart. "I've got the airway," I yelled over the din, grabbing an ambu bag and fitting it over Maya's mouth, squeezing in a steady rhythm. The next few minutes were a blur of coordinated chaos. "Epi is in. Charging to 200. Clear." The defibrillator paddle slammed onto her chest, and her body arched off the bed in a violent spasm. Nothing. The flat line on the monitor remained, a persistent, mocking drone. Through the window I could see Marcus's face, a portrait of absolute agony. He was banging his fist softly against the glass, his lips forming her name over and over. His men stood behind him, their formidable presence useless against this invisible enemy. They could guard against a man, but they couldn't guard against death. The lead doctor, a calm, seasoned veteran named Dr. Evans, looked at the monitor, then at me. His eyes held the grim truth. He opened his mouth to call it. "Again," I shouted, my voice raw. "Charge again." He hesitated for a split second, then nodded. "Clear." Another jolt, another spasm, and then a single miraculous beep. A blip on the screen. Then another. A slow, thready, but steady rhythm appeared. A collective gasp of relief filled the room. Maya's heart was beating. She was back. Dr. Evans stabilized her, barking orders, adjusting drips. He believed she'd thrown a clot a common risk with severe trauma. They'd gotten lucky. Unbelievably lucky. I stepped out of the room, my legs feeling like jelly, and leaned against the wall, my scrubs soaked with sweat. Marcus rushed to me, his eyes wild with 100 questions. "She's back," I managed to say. Her heart stopped, but we got it started again. "She's fighting." He grabbed my hands, his own large calloused ones trembling. "Thank you," he whispered, the words choked with emotion. "Thank you." For the next 2 days, the Sons of Redemption Biker Club became a fixture at St. Mary's Hospital. They were the quietest, most respectful guardians you could imagine. They brought coffee and donuts for the nursing staff. They took turns sitting in the waiting room, reading magazines or just staring into space. A silent, leather-clad vigil. They never once caused a problem. When Lisa, Maya's mother, finally arrived, having been held for hours giving a statement to the police, she practically fell into Marcus's arms. The bikers formed a protective circle around them, giving them a bubble of privacy in the sterile hospital hallway. The police had arrested Rick. With Lisa's testimony and evidence from Maya's car, they had enough to charge him with attempted murder. His reign of terror was over. The bikers made sure of it. 2 of them were parked outside the police station around the clock, just to make sure he didn't somehow make bail. He never did. On the 3rd day, Maya woke up. She was weak, confused, and her throat was sore from the ventilator tube. But she was awake. The first word she whispered was, "Dad." Marcus was at her bedside in an instant, holding her hand, his tough exterior completely gone, tears streaming down his face as he told her how brave she was, how much he loved her. The entire ICU nursing staff was pretending not to cry. Over the next few weeks, Maya began her recovery. The bikers were there every step of the way. They set up a rotation to visit, bringing her cheesy movies, her favorite snacks, and terrible jokes. They turned her sterile hospital room into a place of warmth and laughter. They became her army of loud, protective, leather-clad uncles. When she was finally discharged, 50 motorcycles formed a roaring honor guard, escorting her and her parents home. They didn't just protect her in the hospital. They brought her back to life. Months later, I received an invitation in the mail. It was for a fundraiser, a Ride for Survivors, organized by Marcus's club. All proceeds were going to a local domestic violence shelter. At the event, held in a sprawling park, I saw Maya. She was walking with a slight limp, a faint scar visible on her forehead, but she was radiant. She was laughing, surrounded by her family, both the one she was born into and the one that had adopted her. Marcus found me in the crowd and pulled me into a bone-crushing hug. "We couldn't have done it without you, Doc," he said, even though I'd told him 100 times I was a nurse. He pressed a small, heavy object into my hand. I opened it. It was a silver pendant, a beautifully crafted angel wing. Engraved on the back were 2 words, "Maya's Guardian." I looked over at Maya, who was now playfully trying to put a pink helmet on a massive bearded biker, and he was letting her. I smiled. I'd broken the first rule of the ER. I got attached, and I wouldn't have traded it for anything. My fortress wall was gone, but in its place was something much stronger, a connection to the fierce, messy, and beautiful resilience of the human heart, sometimes found in the most unexpected leather-clad packages.